Sure, Mark.
Great, thanks.
Leanne, can you do either that one or that one?
Yeah, I'll do it over here.
Thanks. If you don't mind that one or up on the first left, right?
That's fine, they can never find you.
Totally do you?
They will never find you for the picture.
Are you coming?
Allie's gonna go.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, I just wanna make sure she has.
Yeah.
Hello. So we're gonna have to stage down the hallway like we've done
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the past and rotate through here.
I figured that part.
So unfortunately, wanna go hang down there,
Sure.
okay? Yeah. Thank you.
You're thinking of this too.
Exactly.
Pretty good. Really good. It's just a structured every day.
I don't know if she's coming. She didn't come.
There's seats.
Is it? She's Tanya Snyder with it. I can wait. Or,
No, it's fine.
yeah.
Just grab a seat.
Okay, thanks.
Would she be able to stand on the side or just?
Hold on, seat. There's a stool seat here. And
Oh,
a stool
okay.
seat over there.
Yeah, she said she was coming.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm not worried.
Okay.
No worries.
She's vaccinated, so. Yeah.
It's all good. It's all good.
Good. How are you?
Plenty
doing?
of them. I'm all right. How's the kids, the fam?
Good. Going to school, hybrid,
Yay.
2 days a week. But that's better than nothing, so.
Leanne, where do you want to sit? Over here?
I mean, I'm fine, but it's fine.
No,
I have a seat.
I don't care. I just
Good.
haphazardly put stuff up, so it's fine.
No, it's fine.
I just do it so I can count, you know.
Okay, that's fine,
No,
thank you.
it's
You
totally
guys
fine.
can move around. When music stops, everybody sit, okay?
I mean,
Over this chair.
Right.
watching it upstairs.
Okay.
Political, good. Your political person made it just. Yeah. Just what one was shaking? There's an empty seat over there. Great. So let it be in there?
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you again. I'll step out. Thank you so much.
You bet. Wait, who's this gentleman? Hi. Hi. Who are you with? I don't have any minutes. There's a seat over here.
Appreciate it.
Sorry. Sorry? We're already out of seats in here. I'm at the limit.
Official. Oh, 3 officials?
You never have enough.
So here's, is there any way you all can
I'm on a
consolidate
seat in here.
yourselves in any way, shape, or form?
Uh,
Are you all working for different entities?
Yes.
So Emma's in over here, and I
This one is Charlie?
We're with the conference.
Okay, so here's the thing. So 2 people with conference, ideally just 1. I'm so sorry, but there's just no way we can have all 3 of you in here at the same time.
Either way,
You're both, yeah. Everybody's making. Understanding.
Thank you.
We can put you right here. All right. Okay. Thank you. And then we're gonna have 1, 2, so we have 3. So we have these 3. Are you good?
You don't have a lot of time.
No, I was just gonna ask you.
And we're all making adjustments for the numbers, so that's why I wanted to make sure. I was like, oh, we can't have 3. You see what I mean? Thank you. Thank you, thank you. One over here in the corner. You can go in those ones. Yeah. And use the door to we do that. So it's comfortable.
Maybe not.
I am, but if our corner is actually full, believe it or not, and there's a door there that we're supposed to walk in.
No, I'm not one.
Yeah, no, I get it, I get it. So there's two people back there in that corner. Same. Yeah, seriously.
I mean, just take your skills first, but then you can switch to, if you have the space. They shoot 24. I mean, probably I shoot 59, so that's what it's going to go to. So they can have to shoot 24. But if you want to shoot 59, just make sure it's the same. That's what they usually shoot in, but I don't know if 59 is an option.
Need help, Trish?
That's what I shoot in, so that would.
I'm okay, I wanted to put one opening back here if someone wanted to use it.
Gotcha.
Do you mind maybe putting it in any of these? Thank you so much, that's helpful. Boxed in here, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's good for at least one person, thank you. I just think it's an excess amount of
Don't worry
chairs,
about
right?
sound, because I got that.
When
Just worry about the shot.
space is the,
So I usually shoot like roll tight, so if you want a wider shot, just
that's a little bit better, thank you so much.
But yeah, take your skills
Excellent.
first, being kind of like a.
So feel free to back up if
You
you
don't
wanted
hit it,
to,
don't worry about
right?
it.
Okay, I can use this as well.
Oh, okay. You get it?
Yeah, we'll have a chair, so. Thanks for helping.
Sure.
And then feel free to stop. It's not much, but it's. No. No. In heels and everything.
Yeah. It's your choice. You do whatever you feel like you want to do. Okay? You do your artistic. This is your artistic. Oscar weekend. So you can do your Oscar profile. Exactly. It's just fun. I did too. But the thing is, like, exactly. What if I have a team?
Good afternoon. Happy Earth Day, everybody. And Senator Barrasso will be joining us shortly. He's going down to vote. And I'm very excited to have my colleagues here with me today to talk about something that's on, I think, a lot of people's minds in terms of our aging infrastructure, our infrastructure, roads and bridges, and other things that we see in our home states that need help. And this is something that Congress has done for many, many years together on a bipartisan basis. Our focus today is to say what our concepts are as Republicans, as what infrastructure means, what our principles are in terms of pay-fors, and then say to President Biden and his team and our Democrat colleagues, we're ready to sit down and get to work on this. I think that's probably the biggest message we want to put forward today, is that this is important to us. So let's define infrastructure. You can see here our definition of infrastructure, and we've talked a lot about this. Core infrastructure, physical infrastructure. What do people think of in our states when they think about infrastructure? And so I'll go through them briefly. Roads and bridges, public transit systems, rail, which could be cargo, passenger rail, water and wastewater. I'm going to stop there for a minute to say that the first part of this infrastructure package could be come up in front of the entire Senate next week, and hopefully will, with the EPW bill on clean drinking water and wastewater that we passed out unanimously. Every Republican, every Democrat voted for this. Ports and inland waterways. Airports. Broadband is the infrastructure that, if you'd ask us this question 10 years ago, we probably wouldn't have thought to do it, or if we had, we would have been very futuristic and been able to see what the great needs would be. But broadband is an essential and core infrastructure package. And lastly, water storage and safety. I think it's important for you all to realize that this is the largest infrastructure investment that Republicans have come forward with. This is a robust package when we look at where we're focusing our infrastructure needs. The funding levels and the principles are meant to guide us. And then we would say, and I would say, now's the time for the committees to get to work. And that's why I think it's really important to note that the folks that are here with me today, Senator Crapo can't join, are the ranking members of the relevant committees that would be moving forward a robust infrastructure package. I've done a lot of outreach to my fellow Republicans. I've talked to Democrats. I've talked to my committee chair, Senator Carper, more than a few times. And I've talked with the White House, which many of us have. Some of us have been down to the White House to talk directly with the president, but we've certainly been talking about how important this is for a 21st century that has forward-looking, innovative infrastructure. So we agree that these bills are necessary and that the committees of jurisdiction should be the ones that force the compromise and forge the great policies that we need to make sure that we're meeting this challenge. So for that to happen, I think also, as I've lined out what infrastructure is, you can see the amount of dedicated funds to a total of about $568 billion as where we would see a great way for us to express what we think the need over 5 years would be in these categories. And we also have concepts of principles of how to pay for this. And some of my colleagues will talk about this, but I think it's important that you know to this point have not or pay very little in terms of the wear and tear that they particularly move forward on our roads and highways. I'm talking about electric vehicles, hydrogen, hybrids, and those kinds of things. We've also heard a lot of talk about other things like a VMT. We've talked about that in committee. No commitments there at all. We're basically just lining out our principles. Another principle that we think is really important is to repurpose dollars that have already been appropriated. There's two specific ways, and I think Senator Toomey will talk about this as well, and knows very much, and it really actually gave me the idea of this, and that is to repurpose some of the unspent dollars from COVID that are no longer considered an emergency that can help us devote to infrastructure. You may recall I had an amendment to that effect when we did the COVID bill to say, let's repurpose a lot of these dollars to infrastructure where it's mostly needed, knowing we were going to have a shortfall in the Highway Trust Fund. The other way would be to say to cities, counties, and states to open it up to, the availability of COVID dollars for them to be able to make matches or pay for infrastructure. And so the other thing is to preserve the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. And that would mean retaining the SALT deduction and other, I think, great economy building aspects of that, which we all voted for. So that's the parameters of where we are. The other thing I would like to add is one of the legs to this stool is permitting. Our permits take too long, they're too costly, they're too complicated, and they end up not just costing time and money, but a lot of people walk away from the projects. And if we're going to really modernize and make sure that we're moving in a direction that we, I think, as Republicans and Democrats want to move, we've got to look at serious permitting reform. And so on that, I'm going to ask Senator Wicker if he would come up. And
well, thank you, Senator Capito, and also to Senators Barrasso and Toomey. It's been great to work with all three of these senators on this good faith effort and this serious effort to get negotiations started with President Biden and our Democratic colleagues in the House and Senate. I was fortunate enough to be in the Monday meeting in the White House with the President and Vice President. Some 10 days ago, there were other Republicans who met in the Oval Office on Monday of this week. Now, today, after talking to many of our colleagues, and particularly the three people behind me, I'm pleased to come forth 10 days after meeting with the President with an offer that really should address what most Americans think of as infrastructure. So, as Senator Capito said, what is infrastructure? It's highways, bridges, it's water and wastewater, it's ports and rail, airports, and certainly we're all agreed that broadband is part of it. So we take the part of the President's plan that most Americans agree is real hard infrastructure. We give it our touch, and we think we have a very good number here. Let me just also point out a couple of things. Congress is accustomed to working on infrastructure in a bipartisan way. The four committees that we represent here have time and again over the decades and in past years worked on infrastructure bill on a bipartisan way. And as Senator Capito said, there's legislation that we hope is pending in the next week or two with regard to some of this infrastructure. But examples of this would be the FAST Act, WRDA bills, FAA reauthorization, things that we've done by consensus over the years, and we think we can do again. This is a big proposal. $1 billion is a lot of money. $568 billion is a lot of money. Now, when we were doing COVID and the economy was skidding toward a depression, we talked in terms of trillions. But let's not forget that $1 billion is an enormous amount of money, and $568 billion is a very, very generous offer in dealing with infrastructure. It will get us a long way to where we want to go in a 5-year plan. I'm disappointed, though I guess not surprised, that some of our colleagues have rejected this before even seeing it. We got it to the President about half an hour ago. We hope he and his team are looking at it, and we think a number of our Democratic colleagues will want to negotiate with us about it. We're ready to start this afternoon. We're ready to put our staffs together this weekend here in the Senate and also with the White House. Let me say one thing about broadband. The $65 billion was arrived at in a considered manner. $81 billion was received from the C-band auction. $16 billion went for the cost that we expected, and that gives us $65 billion. If you take that $65 billion and add it to $40 billion that's already in the pipeline, that's already been passed by this Congress, it gets us very close to the president's $100 billion. And I think that is a most generous figure that we'll have a hard time spending, but I think we can spend it. If we get the maps right and we get the data correct, we can do that within the next 5 years.
Let me start by thanking Senator Capito for her leadership on this. I appreciate that very much. I think this is a very constructive proposal, and as you can see, it consists of actual, real infrastructure. What all of these categories have in common are the fact that they are the systems, the platforms that we all share for the purpose of moving people and goods and services throughout our economy. That's what the American people understand infrastructure to be all about. That's what they support an increased investment in, and as Senator Wicker pointed out, this is a very large increase in Congress's traditional involvement in these areas. And while President Biden would like to do all kinds of things that have nothing to do with infrastructure, my view is we can have that discussion at some point in time, but what we ought to focus on is that which we seem to have agreement on, which is a significant investment in infrastructure. I think it's equally important that we think about how we pay for this. I think there's an idea that unites Republicans and hopefully appeals to many, many Democrats, which is let's do this without taking on still more debt. We've taken on a staggering amount of debt over just the last year. And my view is we should do it without damaging the tax reform that gave us the best economy of my lifetime. Remember, it was just a year ago, just before the pandemic hit, that we literally had the strongest economy of our lifetimes. We had record low unemployment rate, we had strong economic growth, we had rising wages, we had more job openings than there were people looking for jobs, and wages were growing most rapidly for lowest income workers. So we were narrowing the income gap, the wealth gap. At the same time, we were creating tremendous opportunities. That's a really good place to get back to. You don't get back there by ruining the tax reform that helped us get there. So that's what we should not do. Senator Capito touched on some of the ways that we can pay for this. And one of the ways we can do that is in some cases, especially when there's new capacity that we're creating, it's reasonable to ask the people who are going to use that capacity to contribute towards it. So some kind of user fee mechanisms make a lot of sense as a component. But there's also literally hundreds of billions of dollars that's already been approved, it's already been appropriated, but it's unspent, and it's unrelated to COVID. Some of that money can be repurposed. And thirdly, I would suggest that our states and local governments, let's remember, we didn't expect this, but in the end, 2020 was an all-time record year for revenue collected by state and local governments. And in addition to that, we sent them hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. Many state and local governments are flush with cash, and asking them to contribute their fair share towards infrastructure makes a lot of sense, and many of them are quite willing to do so. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat.
Well, first I want to thank the three senators I'm joined with today for their leadership, and we've worked together previously on infrastructure. The four of us have. Last Congress as the chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee, and Roger being an active member of that committee, and Shelley, we worked on all of these things. And Roger, from the commerce standpoint, as chairman, worked with me. Shelley, you did the transportation component of the subcommittee of the Environment and Public Works Committee, focused on what we believe truly to be infrastructure. So President Biden may define infrastructure differently. I say he ought to be honest with the American people and talk about infrastructure in the way that people see it, which is what you have up here. What is infrastructure? You know, the fact that the Biden proposal has only less than 6% of the money for roads and bridges tells you that his focus isn't really on the kind of infrastructure that the American people think of as infrastructure. We're talking about core infrastructure. And if the president wants to have the debate, as Senator Toomey just said, about green lunchrooms in our schools and cafeteria trays that can be recycled and environmental justice, as he talks about it, and climate justice, we can have that debate. But what we ought to do is make sure we're focusing on the needs of the American people. Now, he puts more money in his proposal for electric vehicles than he does for roads, bridges, ports, airports, and waterways combined. So it's time to say we want to do things that are really in the best interest of the American people, what the American people are asking for, and that's why we're here today with this proposal that was sent to the White House a little earlier today. You know, in the last Congress, we came up with a bipartisan bill in the committee in which most of us serve, the Environment and Public Works Committee. It passed the committee 21-0, and it was the highway bill. We had previously done the water infrastructure, again passed unanimously through the committee and signed into law. So there are ways to do this in a bipartisan way, and I would suggest that that template that we did last Congress, got 21 out of 21 votes in the Environment and Public Works Committee, including all of us, and Bernie Sanders and every Democrat, ought to be the basis for which we build an infrastructure plan. And when you take a look at that, there was a climate title included. There were things that allowed us to build from the standpoint of regulations, to build things faster and better and cheaper and smarter. All of those things I think are critically important so the American people can get the infrastructure that they need so they can get to work in a safe way, in an efficient way, effective way, and have the needs of their communities met. Thanks.
I would like just, before we go to a couple questions, say that this is a serious a serious, robust, the most robust plan that we've put forward ever as Republicans. And I think that the American people want to see us working together. They want to. We hear this all the time, and we know it to be true. But this is a real opportunity because of the past history we have of working through the 5 committees that are listed at the bottom of the sheet. If you look at the bottom of the sheet, you can see all of the different committees that weigh in here. I've talked to my House counterparts. I will be talking to DeFazio later at 1 o'clock. I wasn't able to get to him this morning, but we've talked before. So and so I think that we see this as an offer that is on the table and deserves a response, and I think we will get a response, and we look forward to that, and we're ready to get to work. Right, yeah.
This is below the range that you had earlier spoken about, the $16 billion to $800 billion.
Mm-hmm.
What led to that? Can you talk about how willing you are to look at something about this?
You know, I think that we're pretty close to where I had on the lower range there. When we really started putting the pencil to the paper here, we came up with a more definitive figure of where we thought was a good starting point, and that's where we are. And so, you know, we'll go from here. In negotiations, things are always give and take, but I think this is a close to the 600, and we look forward to hearing a response. Yes.
Hi, I wanted to ask sort of a two-parter. You yourself mentioned it's Earth Day, and there's nothing in this plan for EVs, which is a very key component of the Biden proposal. Can you talk a little bit about their omission from that, whether or not it belongs in the infrastructure bill? And second part is, can you talk about the grid and pipelines? I don't see either of those in this bill or in this framework.
Okay, in terms of EVs, I don't think that you can say they're not a part of this plan. If you look at the highway bill that John talked about, ATIA, that we passed a year and a half ago, which we're using as a framework to move through our EPW committee right now, there is EV charging infrastructure and innovation in that plan that we had agreed upon previously. I'm not. This is not prescriptive as to what everything is in this. Just because it says roads and bridges, it doesn't mean that it can't. You know, I'm thinking that as a traditional highway bill. So I think that you know, we see the future. We see we may see it differently than President Biden in terms of what is it, $160 billion incentive to buy an electric vehicle. That's not in here. You're right, but realizing the infrastructure part of that could be a part of a bipartisan bill. That's something that we've talked about. So I wouldn't say that that's exclusive of this. And I think we fully expect, and I haven't really run this by my my folks up here, but I think we fully expect when we get to the negotiating phase that climate will be a part of the discussion. They've made that very clear, and you know, we've talked in our committees, certainly the water bill and other bills, with that as a concern for everybody. The last question was, you know, that's interesting. We had some discussion about grids and pipeline. Again, this is a beginning. as a beginning document. And if when we get into negotiations, and if we do with our Democrat, and we hopefully that we will, Democrat counterparts and the president, and that's a major area of, and I've heard them speak about it. That is something that I think we would all certainly entertain. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything on any of that. So, one more question? Yeah.
So, a two-parter. How much of this is new money, or is this just repurposing and the usual reauthorization?
These figures are what you would consider regular appropriations plus. So it's baseline plus.
How much is the plus?
I'll have to get back to you on that exact figure. I don't have that right in front of me. I would say there is some confusion when you look at the president's plan and the plan that I saw. When you hear that of $115 billion that he's dedicating to roads, that's in addition. So we're going to have to square the figures for you a little bit better. We're working with the White House on that so you can make a better comparison. Yeah.
You're talking about repurposing COVID money.
Mm-hmm.
When that passed, I'm not sure if this is from what we saw passed in last month or what we saw passed in 2020, but there were complaints that some of that money was unnecessary and it wasn't paid for. So how do you square that now, repurposing money that wasn't paid for this plan?
Well, I don't know, Pat, if you want to.
Well, so the point is not to go out and incur new and additional debt. We incurred the debt to cover those obligations, but we think that they can be put to better use in many cases. Money that is not scheduled to be spent till the distant future, money that had nothing to do with COVID or the economic response. So we think that should be available for this. This is a higher purpose, we think.
You know, the other thing I would say on the COVID dollars, when it goes to state and local, we did narrow what state and local could pay for. And my understanding is it was broadband and water projects. So exclusive of that are road projects and bridges projects. And so if our communities and our states can get together and decide that that's a high priority for them, they couldn't use their COVID dollars to match for that right now. We're saying we ought to be able to we ought to be able to do that. So, okay. Thank you all very much. Thanks.
Very well.
Thanks for coming, y'all. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to I'm Marty.
Get any video, Molly? Did we get any video?
I did, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, just
Thank you for
maybe
coming.
go back to the office and give Joe the card or whatever. I told him you were getting something.
Are you with one of the applicants?
Yes, I'm on Senator Capito.
Oh, you are. I'm just trying to
You know what, it's better than what he got.
How are you? 2 seconds, just a pause. Who's live stream? So sorry. Thank you for